Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Stamperia Vintage Library mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. If you are new to the tutorial series, all of the products on the Scrap and Create website for this project are listed in the description box below, so you can click on those links, purchase those products, and join me in the tutorial series. Today's video, we're going to be constructing the actual album cover itself. So I'm going to start with the hinges first so that I can get rid of my scoreboard. I have two pieces here. The first is cut to 2.5 by 8 1/4. The second is cut to 3.5 by 8 1/4. Now I'm going to take these and score at 1/2 inch every 1/2 inch. So 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2. Along the 2.5 inch side. Then for my 3.5 inch piece, I'm going to do the same thing and score every 1/2 inch. And we're going to be using a stack the deck binding system, but there's going to be also an extra hinge section to allow the pages to lay flatter when you turn them in the album. I don't like when the pages stick up in the air, so this is a nice way that they will lay a little bit flatter in the book. Now, if you prefer a different style of binding, you can go ahead and do that, but this tutorial is going to be for this type of binding system here. So now that I have my pieces scored, I will move my scoreboard out of the way, and we're going to start to prepare these pieces. So I'm just going to very carefully fold back on each of these and score in both directions on all of these score lines. Now I'm making sure that when I do this that my lines are very straight because I don't want this to be crooked. So before I actually use my bone folder, I make sure that this is straight with the edge, and then I will go up my score line. Something I found has been pretty useful so that these actually are straight so that when you go to put your pages on, it lines everything up straight too. Now, once I have everything scored in one direction, I flip over and score all of my lines again in the opposite direction. Because this is going to be the hinge, these pages are going to be folding back and forth. It'll actually fold a little bit easier if they are burnished in both directions. So I've got my first piece, and I'm going to do the same thing with my second piece. Then just like with the first one, I'm going to fold each of these in the opposite direction. And now I have my pieces. I'm going to fold 2 over and 2 over. And then I'm going to fold these up. So these 3 are going to be the base of that piece. I'm going to fold these 2 over and these 2 over. And then that 1 is the base of this piece, and they're going to go on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is add my adhesive here to this entire middle 1/2 inch section on the back side of my smaller hinge piece. And then I'm going to use my score lines here to place my hinge in the correct position, so that it's straight across the bottom and the top and it is resting right between these score lines. It'll be the same on this side here. Just verifying and making sure, and then I'm going to burnish this down. And now that it's down, I'm going to open both of them flat so that I can really burnish this. So now we have our hinges for our 4 pages and our extension pieces to give them a little bit more flexibility. We're going to set this piece aside, and next we need to cut our chipboard pieces. So we've got 2 pieces that measure 7 inches by 8.5 and 1 piece that measures 3 inches by 8.5 inches. Normally when I do my spine piece, it's only 2.5 inches, but because I'm going to do a curved spine section on this album, I'm doing 3 inches. So there's going to be a 1/2 inch curve, and the spine itself on the album is only going to be 2.5 inches to accommodate the hinges that we just made, but the piece is 3 inches. Now, if you don't want that curved spine look and you just want to do a traditional spine, you will need to cut this down, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of extra space here. So you'll want to cut this to 2.5 inches instead of 3 if you're not doing that curved spine. We are going to wrap the covers using 2 pieces of 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardstock and 1 piece that's 5 inches by 11 inches. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently from how I normally do my albums. I usually do a lay flat cover, but with this one I'm going to wrap it just because of the way that the cover is designed with that that rounded spine on it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to be using my tacky glue. You can also use double-sided tape here if you want to. I'm just going to run my glue down the 11-inch length of this paper here. I want to overlap this by 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do, I'm using the grid on my mat. So I'm lining this up down here at the bottom so that it's straight across that line. And if you don't trust yourself to do this without it moving, tape your paper down with a washi tape piece. I've got it past this line 1/4 inch, and I'm going to set this down here. And then line everything up as best I can. And then I'm going to press this down, and then I'm going to use my bone folder. Now you want to make sure that you hold this in place as you do this, because you don't want this to shift or move as you are burnishing it. So now that I have that piece on, I'm going to next add my adhesive down the opposite side. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to line this up on the bottom, and then 1/4 inch past my line. And then I'm going to place my second full sheet of my cardstock along those lines to line them up. Once it's lined up, I'll go ahead and burnish this to adhere these pieces together. Then I'm going to let this dry before I move on to the next step. I'm going to mark a guideline next on my paper, just as a way to place these straight. My ruler is 1 1/4 inches, and that's just how much I need my line to be. So mark up 1 1/4 inches from the bottom and draw a horizontal line. Next, we're going to be placing our pieces. So we're going to start with the spine piece, placing it here in the center. I have already marked this so that it is in the center of my piece. So you want to go ahead and do that first. And then we're going to prepare this piece to start curving it. So I'm just going to take my thumbs and start working my chipboard a little bit and bending it. You can actually wet this if you want to. It actually works a little bit easier, but I don't feel like going in getting water to do this, so I'm just going to bend it with my thumbs. What we're doing is just breaking down the fibers a little bit so that it's not quite as stiff. And I also will use my glue bottle. It's just the perfect curve here to start to curve my piece in the right shape. So you want to take your time with this. It does take a little bit of time to work these fibers, but it's a really easy method to get that look, that curved spine. The one thing I will say about wetting this when you do this is that you won't have these marks on it, but we're going to be putting decorative paper on it anyway, so you're not going to end up seeing that. And now that I have this curved, I'm actually going to flatten it out again. And then we're going to be adhering this down here. So I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to this whole entire back side of my chipboard spine piece, making sure that it's coated well so that this will cover. And we're going to be curving it again once all this glue dries. But we wanted to make sure we curved it first without that paper on top of it, because it will be thicker once we have it on the paper. So I'm going to place this down on my horizontal guideline and in the center of my spine piece, and adhere this down to the paper. Now, because it was curved, I need to make sure that it does lay nice and flat on here. So I'm going to just continue to work with this until it's firmly on that paper. Now I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch over. I'm going to turn this So I want to make sure that my cover is 1/8 of an inch from my spine piece. If I put them too close together, when I fold my cover, it will actually crack along the spine piece, and this is the easiest way to make sure it doesn't crack. You want to do at least 2 times the thickness of your chipboard. This is actually more than the thickness of my chipboard, but it'll look nice. And once I have my extra paper in here, it'll give me enough space, so just to be on the safe side. So what I'm going to do is take my covers and apply them down next. So just like that spine piece, I am going to add my adhesive on the entire cover. That way the cover paper is well adhered to my cover and it doesn't come loose, and there's no puckers in it or bubbles. So once I have my adhesive on, I'm going to use my ruler to make sure that these are lined up straight on the bottom edges. And then I am right on that line that I drew at 1/8 of an inch past my spine. And I'm going to adhere this down to the page. Now I'm going to flip this so that it's easier for me. I'm going to take the other cover. Then I'm going to add my adhesive to the back, just like I did this previous cover. And then I'm going to use that line. I'm going to take my ruler this time. It's going to be on the top because my page is flipped over. And then I'm going to adhere the cover to the paper. And next I'm going to flip this over and burnish all 3 sections from the back side. Before I go any further, I am going to cut some of this excess paper off. So there's 1 1/4 inches here. So I'm going to cut this. So this is 1 1/4 inches too. So it looks like there's about 3/4 of an inch too much. I usually leave about 1 inch, but the way this cover was, it's 1 1/4. So I just left it because I figured it was fine. It's not a big deal if there's more than that, but it's not necessary either, so I'm just going to take it out while I can. Next, we're going to be using our scissors to cut these corners. So if you've never done this before, I'm going to show you what this is going to be like, but I'm just going to be cutting mine. So we're going to cut our corners, we're going to miter them, but we're going to leave, this is a little too much, we're going to leave about 1/8 of an inch extra past that corner. That way when we wrap it, we can tuck that around and that whole entire corner will be wrapped. So I just eye this when I cut mine. If you don't feel comfortable eyeing it, use your ruler and draw a line. Next, I'm going to take my paper. I'm going to fold that one around. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just pressing this around to wrap it. And once I have it up and over, I'm going to use my bone folder, and then I'm going to use the bone folder up against this edge too. This is what will give you nice crisp edges on your album so that it's wrapped really well. I'll do the same thing on this side. Then I'm going to open up, add my adhesive to this entire flap section here. Then I'm going to fold back over and use my bone folder to adhere this down nice and tight to my chipboard. Then I'm going to repeat that on this side over here. Folding this side over and burnishing it down so that it's nice and smooth and a tight, crisp fold on the cover. Once these are done, take your bone folder, press against the corner here, press into the corner to wrap that corner piece. So you take your bone folder and press in. So you're pushing that little tiny bit of paper right up against that corner piece, so it's wrapping that with the paper. Then we're going to take the entire piece and we're going to bend the long sides down next. And just like the short sides, take your time folding these over and then running your bone folder along that edge to create that crisp crease. Now, when you're first learning how to do mini albums, you might go a lot slower, and that's okay. Take your time. It'll be worth it because you'll do it right the first time and you don't have to worry about redoing something or it being sloppy. Once you have those burnished, you're going to open them back up, and here you're going to add your adhesive just like with the shorter ends, only this one is much longer. So if you're using wet adhesive, you want to be quick about putting it on because it will start to dry on you if you're too slow. fold that over. I like to just get it stuck on first and then start to smooth it out. And then go back and really make sure that it's nice and straight and flat and crisp. Then I'm going to fold into my folds here just to get those started. Going to turn over and do the same thing on the final side, adding my adhesive first to the entire tab section. And then folding over. And burnishing this piece down. Now I'm going to fold up on my cover now. I don't always do this, but I'm going to do it with this one. And I'm using my bone folder and running these pieces down into the crease. So that way they will adhere in the creases. Next, I'm going to take my cover. I'm going to use my glue bottle as I do this, and I'm going to start bending my cover again, this time with the cardstock on it. Then I'm going to make sure nothing bubbles up or comes off of the chipboard. Just kind of gets me started with that curve. So now I have my curve, and I will continue to work with this until I get it to where I need it to be when I put my hinges in. So for now, I'm going to leave it just like this. So I have my book. I'm going to bend back on those covers as well so that they will lay flat while that spine is still curved. Now I need to cover this spine section because you will see that the pages aren't actually going to be attached flat down to this. They'll be attached to the cover, but not to the spine. So I have a piece of cardstock that is 2 15/16 of an inch. If you don't have a 15/16 measurement, just do slightly less than 3 inches. And this is 8 1/4. So when I set this on here, you will see that it is just a tiny bit smaller. You're not going to really see this. You just want to make sure that you cover this middle section. So I am going to take my adhesive and apply it to the entire back section of this piece of cardstock and apply it right down to my spine section. And I want to make sure that this has plenty of adhesive on it, just like I did with my covers, because this is also going to be curved. So when I curve it, I don't want it to be bubbling off. And then I'm just going to center this top and bottom so that there is a small margin at the top and the bottom. And then I'll use my bone folder to burnish this down. So now that this is burnished down, I'm going to let this dry really well. It's late at night, so I'm just going to let this sit until morning. Then I'm going to come back and we're going to curve this piece. If you don't have time to let this sit for a super long time like I do overnight, give it an hour, maybe half hour, and then come back and do this step. But you don't want to do this step too early, the next step, because you don't want this to be bubbling off. So if you are really wanting to continue the tutorial, stop this part now and then move on maybe to the next video and start that if you can, so that you don't have to worry about ruining this piece. So I will come back and we're going to finish up this. We're going to add the hinges in, and then the build for our album will be finished. Now that this is completely dry, I'm going to start to bend this again to curve my spine piece. So I'm just going to use my glue bottle like I did previously and try to get this to start to bend a little bit. And I'm just going to keep working this until I get that curve. And I think once I have it curved, I'll be able to smooth out some of these wrinkles in here. I'm not really going to see them anyway because there's going to be a spine piece over this with the hinges. So once I have it curved, I'm going to use my ruler to check how curved it is. Here it's about 2 3/4. So I'm just going to continue curving this. And then I'm going to smooth this out. Until I have it the way that I want it. So again, there's going to be another piece on top of here with my hinges, so we're not going to necessarily see that. So it's okay if it's a wrinkled look. Now we need a piece that measures 5 inches by 8 1/4 inches. On the 5-inch side, I'm going to score this at 1 1/4. And I'm going to score this at 3 3/4. Now I'm going to take this and bend this in both directions. And this is going to be the piece that's going to sit here and be where our hinges are going to lay. But we're going to adhere this down one side at a time. We're going to take this score line and line it up with this crease here and with this one here, but we're going to do it one at a time, and we're going to be placing the adhesive on this tab and then laying this down, and then we'll do on the second one because we're going to need to curve this up here to get that curve in the spine. So then I need to mark this so this is 1.5. So I need to mark this at 3/4. There we go. Now I'm going to take my hinge and apply my adhesive to this entire back side on all 3 of these flat sections. Once it's covered with my adhesive, I'm going to just drop this right in the center, making sure that the top and the bottom lines up, and then burnish this down. Now I'm going to add my adhesive to one side of my hinge piece here. I'm not going all the way down to that score line. And I'm going to take this, lining up the top and bottom so that it's in the center, and then I'm going to make sure that my score line is right in that fold, and then I'm going to lay this down and burnish so that it adheres to my cover. Now when we place this one, we're going to need to make sure that this is curved. So you might be needing to press in on yours depending on how much your curve is. But we're going to end up using both hands when we do this, pressing this down, getting this to line up, and then folding this over. So again, I'm going to add my adhesive to this entire tab section, not quite going all the way to my score line. And then I'm going to place this down. Now the benefit here of using glue instead of double-sided tape is that you have a little bit of room to move that around. I'm sorry, I know this might obstruct your view, but I need this to lay in my crease. So I need to hold this rest of the cover up in the air. If you use double-sided tape here, you have to be exact when you put this down because you are not going to be able to move it. So just be careful if you're using double-sided tape. And I'm just going to smooth this down. And now when I bring it up here, you can see there is that curve still, and my spine piece is still relatively straight, but there's some flex in it, but that's going to make it a little bit more than 2.5, just the way it's stretched right now. And that's okay if yours is a little bit more than 2.5 too. It's not exact just because it is curved. So now we have our cover. I'm going to leave my cover like this to let it dry. I'm going to open it up though so you can see on the inside. When it's opened, there's still that curve in the spine, but the covers are going to lay flat and then the pages will come down. So I will leave this in this position, like I said, to let this dry fully. This is it for the cover construction. So in the next video, we're going to actually begin decorating using the vintage library papers. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that next. And if you are just tuning into the series, all of the papers that I will be using and the other supplies that are available on the Scrap and Create website will be linked in the description box below. So go ahead and click on those links, check those out, and purchase those if you haven't already so you can continue with me in the tutorial.